We have number 7th ranked Cincinnati, currently ranked 7th in all of college football, 3-0, facing Notre Dame, who is currently ranked 9th in the AP Top 25 poll, and they're undefeated. Now, Cincinnati is a 2-point favorite going into this game. This game is going to be played on NBC with a 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff. Now, this is it. If you are a Cincinnati fan, or you're somebody who's rooting for a G5 school to get into the college football playoffs, this is the game that you have had circled on the calendar before the season began. This is going to be the ultimate test for Cincinnati in terms of trying to figure out if this team is capable of being able to hang with some of the blue bloods of college football. And yes, I do consider Notre Dame to be a blue blood. Okay, now I know they haven't had a lot of success against the Clemsons, the Ohio States, and the Bamas of the world, but this has been a team that has consistently been in that conversation in the playoffs consistently, a good amount of years. So you look at this Notre Dame team, some way, somehow has still played at a very high level, even though they have a pretty good amount of inefficiencies. The first big inefficiency that they have is on their offensive line. Their offensive line has struggled this year, and it's no surprise because they lost a lot of guys who were really talented last year to the NFL, and they've kind of struggled this year. I'm not even going to say kind of struggled, like they struggled mightily this year. Last week they gave up like 6 sacks to Wisconsin. Now, the good thing is that you're not facing a front seven like Wisconsin this week. You're facing Cincinnati. The strength of their team is in the secondary. Up front, Cincinnati really isn't all that great when it comes to getting consistent pressure on the QB. So when you look at Notre Dame and you look at this offensive line had a lot of hell last week when it came to not only giving Jack Cohen time to sit back and throw the football, but they also had troubles in the run game. Because did you know that Notre Dame only had 3 rushing yards versus Wisconsin last week? I'm not making that up. Notre Dame had 3 rushing yards versus Wisconsin. I can't remember the last time Notre Dame got beat down like that up front. But yes, people, they only had 3 rushing yards. So can Notre Dame get the run game back on track? Because you have Kyron Williams, who is one of the better backs in the country. Can you get him going in this game? Now, the Notre Dame passing game, in my opinion, has been pretty impressive. Now, I know a lot of people were critiquing Jack Cohen because he was missing a lot of guys, but you was facing a really good defense in Wisconsin. But this offense, when it comes to the passing game, has been pretty solid, especially when you look at the situation that their offensive line is in right now. I like the receivers. That's one thing that Notre Dame hasn't really had over the last couple of years. I think that this is probably the best receiving corps that I've seen Notre Dame have in some time. You have a lot of guys in this wide receiving room who can make a lot of big plays downfield. So if Notre Dame's offensive line is able to give Jack Cohen some time to throw the football, he can do some damage. Now, Cincinnati has a really good secondary. They have an All-American at corner. You also have some other good players out on this defense. But for Cincinnati, I really want to see if this pass rush is going to be able to take advantage of a pretty not so good and inconsistent offensive line in Notre Dame. An offensive line in Notre Dame that's still trying to figure out, their identity for real. We still don't really know what this Notre Dame offensive line is. We know it's bad, but we don't know if this offensive line is better when it comes to pass protection than it is in run protection. We will never really know for real. So I think for Notre Dame, if you're Brian Kelly, you definitely have to try to find a way to make things easier on the offensive line. So if you're Tommy Rees, I think you're probably going to want to try to, maybe see if you can get some screen passes going early, try to get the ball out quick, and then have the Cincinnati defense playing up, so then you can try to take some shots downfield. But for Notre Dame offensively, you definitely have to get that run game going, because I really don't think that this is a game when Notre Dame can be one-dimensional and try to beat Cincinnati airing the football a lot, because Cincinnati, one of their biggest vulnerabilities on defense is the fact that they're not all that great against the run. Their pass defense is phenomenal, but it's a huge drop off when it comes to their pass defense to their run defense. Now, their run defense isn't awful, but it's definitely something that Notre Dame could exploit. if the offensive line is able to play up to, being solid and plays better than what they have so far this year. So when you look at this Notre Dame offense, if they're going to win this game, they definitely aren't going to be able to do it just airing the football out. They're definitely going to have a balanced attack, and they're definitely going to have Kyron Williams in that run game going in this game. Now, when you look at Cincinnati, on the other hand, their offense hasn't really looked all that great. The last time I saw Cincinnati play, they played against Indiana. Now, although they won that game, it was a really sloppy performance from the offense. And one thing that I noticed about Cincinnati's offense is that they kind of start out really slow. They look really inefficient. Desmond Ridder included. A lot of people consider him to be one of the best QBs in college football. He needs to play like a superstar in this game. Last year, he looked like a superstar. So far this season, I haven't really seen it. He looked okay against Indiana, but I didn't really see this Desmond Ridder that a lot of people have been gassing up before the season began. I've yet to see Desmond Ridder, the superstar, yet. And he's going to need to play like a superstar because he's facing his former defensive coordinator in Marcus Freeman. Another intriguing storyline to keep up with. Marcus Freeman formerly was the defensive coordinator for Cincinnati. Cincinnati had a great defense over the last couple of years under Marcus Freeman. He's now the defensive coordinator for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's defense has turned the corner over the last couple of weeks. This defense has looked really good. Now, although their defense had their best performance last week against a pretty poor Wisconsin offense, this defense has turned the corner. This looks like a better defense now than what it was when we initially started the season. Marcus Freeman runs a pretty aggressive defense. This is a defense that's very physical, they're very fast, and they're aggressive. And also on top of that, how is Marcus Freeman going to game plan against his former team? Because I think that he probably knows Cincinnati's tendencies a little bit better than anybody else. So when you look at Marcus Freeman, how prepared is he going to be against Desmond Ridder? And how is Cincinnati's offense going to adjust to what Marcus Freeman is throwing at him? So it kind of goes co-hand, because for Cincinnati offensively, you kind of know what to expect from Marcus Freeman's defense, and if you're Marcus Freeman, you kind of know what to expect from Desmond Ridder and the Cincinnati offense. So which side is going to be able to switch things up? It's like going into a boxing match and you both know what your opponent likes to do. So what are going to be some new wrinkles that you're going to throw in to kind of catch each other off guard? Are you going to throw an uppercut out of nowhere, or are you going to do a spinning back fist? Something to really take note of. Now, Jack Cohen, the starting quarterback for Notre Dame, had like a little injury scare during the Wisconsin matchup where he had his backup coming in. His backup played pretty well. Brian Kelly pretty much has said that Jack Cohen's injury isn't nothing serious, and a lot of people expect him to play in this game. So that's a pretty big sign of relief, because I feel like Jack Cohen has played pretty well so far for Notre Dame, although he has had some inaccuracy issues at times. He's thrown 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions and has thrown for 986 passing yards. So I've been really impressed with how Jack Cohen has played this year, and he's had some pretty big moments, like that game against Toledo, I believe it was, when his thumb got dislocated, popped out of place, he went on the sideline and popped it back in and threw the game-winning touchdown. Like, Jack Cohen has had some moments. But when you look at Notre Dame, this is a team that, although they're ranked in the top 10, they have a lot of vulnerabilities. And same thing for Cincinnati. I'm not really sold on their offensive tackles. I think their offensive tackles are something that could be exploited in this game. And on top of that, when you look at their defense, I don't really know how good they're going to be against the run in this game, because I definitely feel like Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator for Notre Dame, is going to have a commitment towards running the football in this game. And if you're Cincinnati, okay, you can't afford to come out and have a slow start like how you did against Murray State or how you did against Indiana. Because one thing about Notre Dame is that Notre Dame takes care of the football. So if you're Cincinnati, you can't afford to come out sloppy. Indiana was your first test. Now this is the big shebang. You're going against one of the elites of college football. We're just going to see what this Cincinnati team is made of. They're a 2-point favorite in this game for a reason. And I'm going to roll with Cincinnati to get the victory. Now, I know it seems like I've been picking against Notre Dame every single week, but I just feel like Notre Dame has a lot of vulnerabilities that I thought that Wisconsin would be able to take advantage of, but Wisconsin's offense wasn't up to the task. I think with Desmond Ridder, and you look at how good of a quarterback he is, I think he could end up making some game-defining plays, which puts Cincinnati over the top. And I know Marcus Freeman is the defensive coordinator for Notre Dame. He's going to know his former team. But I also feel like at the same time, you look at Cincinnati, this is a really talented team also who is also really well coached. And you got to remember, they didn't even play their best football against Indiana. They were still able to win this game. Well, they were still able to win that game. When you look at Notre Dame, they're still trying to find their identity offensively. Notre Dame has kind of been winning games other ways, rather that be special teams and on defense. But I really feel like in this game, they're going to need an all-around great performance. Same thing for Cincinnati. And I'm going to have to roll with Cincinnati because you look at Notre Dame, you look at the issues that they have up front of their offensive line. I don't really think they could give up 6 sacks to Cincinnati and expect to win this game. Special teams and defense bailed them out last week, but in this game, you're going to have some offense, and the special teams and defense has outplayed the offense so far, and I think that's going to be the reason why I'm going to have to roll with Cincinnati to pull off the win. Give me Cincinnati. 27-17 is going to be my final score prediction in this game. Cincy.